And apparently it's Tuesday. Can you believe it's the 2nd? The 2nd of September? Do you remember? Wowzer. Yeah, Miss Becky, she's been going to school pretty much all summer to get things ready. But today was a whole different day. She put on just like her teacher clothes, teacher clothes. Yeah, welcome back, kids. Many of you have probably been already just like at the game for a couple of weeks, but I think if we did a longitudinal study, today would be the day that most students in higher ed and K 12 are returning back to the classrooms. Yes, and everybody's all bright eyed and bushy tailed and just wait until, end of October. Yeah, it's the most wonderful time of the year. I'm not going to sing that until December. I promise. I promise. Hey, yeah, here's my sipper cup today. Shout out Bay Mills College. Thank you, Dr. Bedell. That was a wonderful parting gift. I think we've had, I just have little trinkets all over that's a comet. That's somebody's mascot. I don't know. Put it in the comments if you know whose mascot a comet. Not a Cupid or a Donner. This one's a comet. How cute, right? Hey, enough horsing around. Last week, I had a campus VP actually share just one of those hot mic moments from her team. I think it's going to illustrate what we need to dive into today. How apropos. It involved a department chair who accidentally, you ever done this? Accidentally hit the reply all button. Raise your hands if you've ever hit the reply all button and it was a whoopsie instead of just the reply. Yeah, on a campus wide message. This one happened to be about some new academic initiative that related to the priorities on campus. And her response, I'm sure, was just intended for her dean, but it went to the entire leadership team. And yeah, she wrote something like, the strategic initiatives, they look really impressive. The president was talking, very, very compelling. The presentation looked great, but I have no idea how we're supposed to implement them with our current faculty, our current facilities, our workload, our budget constraints, some of the political pressure that we currently have. And then it was something like, hey, should I say something in tomorrow's meeting or should I just keep my yap shut? And like I always do. Yeah. So there was a message here. And, within minutes, basically that email was quickly recalled. There was an apology that was sent out and kind of that crisis averted. But for 60 seconds, it was a hair raising. Yeah. Just that accidental, but maybe it was authentic. Maybe it was the truth that was leaking out, right? I think that is what I'd like to talk about today. That accidental truth that reveals, I think, something that is happening in leadership teams across K-12 higher ed. It doesn't really matter right now. Your people know things you desperately need to know. If you're the boss listening to this, yeah, you got to make great decisions. That's the only thing you need to do to keep your preferred parking spot. That's it, boss. Easy peasy, right? Just make great decisions. But they're oftentimes protecting you from those truths because they think it's their job to make your vision work, not to make it better. And that's the different part. Continuous improvement is a real thing. And if we're just hustling after a vision without necessarily thinking about continuous improvement, might be getting tripped up maybe in a month or so. So what I've learned after working with ed leaders during many, many back to school seasons, right? From community college presidents to big city superintendents to rural America, the gap between that August confidence, like we got this, and the September reality, it's not a bug in the system. It's it's really more like a feature, right? We've accidentally designed into our educational leadership systems, right? You've allowed it to come in. You've admitted that right now. As we start this academic year, I think it's safe to say you have a nagging feeling that there's a few things that you don't know about your own organization. Right? Every courageous leader I know, whether they're running a 2,000 student district or a 40,000 student university, they've stood in front of their team wondering, hey, what is really happening behind those polite nods? I live in Minnesota. I mean, that's our the kind of the state jiggle is just this right here. There's a new term, state jiggle. Yeah, we just kind of politely nod, even though in our heads it's saying something pretty volatile. And we learn to just smile professionally. Fine, fine. Uh-huh. Because here's what's at stake when you launch this academic year, you've got a lot invested into this. You're making decisions based upon what you think is happening. Um, your faculty is managing these realities. Your middle managers are managing these realities that you can't really see. Right? Your deans, your principals are they're solving problems you don't know really exist, and your students are experiencing a system, right, that got launched that might accidentally be designed around some assumptions instead of just straight up truth, right? And the cost really isn't. It's not professional. It could be generational if you are stay blinded long enough. Every day we lead based upon incomplete information. I do. You do as well. Um, so every day that happens is another day of missed opportunities to transform the lives that we're called to transform. Right? I just want you to know you're not alone. Let me share some data that I think perfectly squares and captures what's happening in that. Remember that accidental email? The American Council of Education just released their 2025 leadership study alongside research from the School Superintendents Association. It was kind of uncanny how the two research pieces came together. 79% of academic leaders, from provosts to principals, doesn't matter, report having critical information about implementation challenges that they've never really shared with their supervisors. They've had the polite nods and the smiles. Oh, fine. Things are going well. But the numbers that should keep us maybe from sleeping tonight is that 74% of senior educational leaders believe that their direct reports tell them everything that they need to know about what's really happening across their institution. That leaves out a quarter of the people, 1 in 4, that are holding information. They're playing cards going, I want to be translucent with you, boss, not transparent, right? And they know that your only job is to make great decisions. So, in a way, it's kind of playing derelict of duty in my eyes. Anyways, why is it happening? That's a 30-point gap between what's shared and what leaders really think that they're hearing. So it's a big deal. It really is. And it exists whether you're leading a rural school. Did I just say rural? Yeah. A small school or a Research One university. Really, 3 weeks ago, I was fascinated. I was leading a leadership team retreat that included both a community college and a high school at the same time. So the community college and the school district were doing a joint function together. During the break, they found themselves comparing notes. Okay. And the president of this community college says, my department chairs keep saying that they're handling the new accreditation requirements, but I suspect, I'm sniffing out, that they're drowning and don't want to admit it. Uh-huh. How do you become a department chair? I don't know that there's a lot of training that goes into it. It's kind of like Little League Baseball. Sorry, you can cancel me if you want, but I've just seen this. This is reality. Hey, Kurt, it's your turn to be department chair. Yeah, many of them are drowning and don't want to admit it. right? The superintendent actually just nodded and said, "Hey, same here, but different deal. New curriculum standards. My principals report that they're on track." But again, something just kind of smells off. Two different contexts, identical leadership challenges, but wow, what can we learn from that? So that afternoon, I watched both leaders present just glowing progress reports of their respective boards. And um, one was about accreditation readiness. The other one was about just this curriculum alignment for reading the READ Act. Two different realities in each of the organizations. And I've seen this pattern across hundreds of educational institutions, right? Um, we've created cultures where people get rewarded for making leaders feel successful, not for making systems actually work. So kind of breaks my heart because I'm all about results-based culture. And if it's just this, fine, no, we're on track. When leaders operate in that sanitized information sharing, it creates a cascade of consequences. Your faculty stop sharing real challenges, your dean stop sharing, your principals stop sharing, eventually your VPs are going to, kind of shut down as well, and all the way down the organization. Uh, and it's going to impact students, right? They experience the gap in delivery from what you say you're going to do and what's actually happening in their learning environments because of some of the silly games that we play. Yeah. How many of you right now have that feeling? Just that subtle, persistent sense. Like, yeah, we say that everything's ready to go, but not feeling it. The conversations are happening in your buildings, in your districts, in your campuses that you're maybe not a part of. Whether it's happening in faculty lounges or principal meetings, how many of you have announced an initiative and watched people's faces for that split second of hesitation before they smile and nod? I'm fine. On track. How many of you go home wondering, what am I not seeing that everybody else seems to understand? Pretty normal, boss. The pattern is universal. Yeah. We're leading institutions with highlight reels. Boom. Look at that dunk. Look at touchdown. Instead of behind the scenes footage of what's really going on. So what I discovered studying just these breakthrough teams, because not every team is like another, just so you know, boss. Most of y'all are pretty average, but every once in a while you see that little blip that just pops out of the average box and goes, ooh, look at me. I'm always curious about what are they doing differently. From community colleges to comprehensive high schools to large suburban school districts to research universities, it's this thing I call the reality shield. It doesn't really have a big fancy name. It's just that invisible barrier that prevents truth from reaching the leaders who desperately need to hear it. If you've studied any of Dr. Amy Edmondson's groundbreaking research, I think she hails from Harvard, but it reveals something that will change, I think, how you think about your leadership. Organizations with high psychological safety. Yes, you've heard that. Some of you are just like, it's kind of squishy and it makes a little noise like a dog toy. Yeah. That's psychological safety. It's actually when people feel real safe just to share challenge, difficult truths, right? Um, those are the types of cultures that are outperforming you and all the rest of them by nearly, it's over 50%. It's like in that 60 to 68% range in complex problem solving tasks. So you can solve the routine stuff. What color are the balloons going to be at the convocation? Whatever. But the complex stuff of, I'm not even going to get into AI and some of the political pressures and how we stay in demand and how the pipeline is changing altogether, but how we need to rethink altogether how we do business and education. Not everybody's ready for that, especially if you don't have psychological safety. But there's that 26% of leadership teams that create environments where this kind of truth telling actually happens. And I'm just delighted when I happen to see it. And there's usually a really strong yet humble leader at the head of that table. This holds true whether we're talking about university cabinets or district leadership teams across the board. But it's only about a quarter of the institutions that we've bumped into. Think about that. We're trying to solve our most complex challenges in society, educating every learner from pre-kindergarten through graduate school while operating with incomplete information because our people don't feel safe telling us what they really see, boss. So here's what really happens in the brains when you lead, when I lead based upon our assumptions. And no, I'm not gonna do the ass of you and me. Let's talk about brain science. It's that prefrontal cortex, right? Your executive decision making center. Beep 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 beep. It kind of narrows its focus. You cannot access your highest leadership capacity when you're disconnected from the ground truth, as the military folks would say. What's the ground truth here of your organization? So, meanwhile, back at the ranch, right, your people's brains are doing something equally damaging. They're constantly calculating whether sharing that difficult information will help or hurt their relationship with you, and how that plays in their desire to be promoted someday, and all of that mental energy. It should be focused on actually solving problems, not managing the motions or managing the politic of all that's at play. John Hattie, one of my favorite instructional leaders, he analyzed a ton of educational systems, ton being hundreds, probably 500 educational systems, and found something remarkable. Where the institutions where leaders practice structured reality gathering, they achieve learning outcomes that are far greater, almost 2.5 times higher than those operating just on assumptions themselves. Why? Tell you in a minute. Because they're not just making better decisions, they're not following best practice. They're making decisions based on what's actually happening in classrooms and lecture halls. They're doing rounds. They can see it real time, the observations, right, across their learning environments. It's not just this pageantry that we pull off. Right? That explains why every single struggling leadership team I've ever worked with, it just wasn't about individual competence. These were brilliant educators, whether they had PhDs and decades of K-12 experience, didn't matter. It was about what I call organizational blindness, that inability to see the gap between intended impact and actual implementation. So when I see teams suffer from the reality shield syndrome, it just shows up. The stakes are high too. The same problem. Let's have another committee, another council, maybe a consultant, or maybe a different consultant because we've already tried that one every semester because root causes remain hidden. Is that your reality? Yeah. You might have talented faculty and staff just feeling invisible or undervalued. That's a big deal. In fact, I threw out a stat the other day with the team. Nearly 82% of your team feels a little bit unseen. That's most of us because their expertise isn't accessed. And you've got strategic initiatives that really sound brilliant in boardrooms, but the struggle bus in real world application. And it just slows everything down. And leaders carrying the impossible burdens because they're trying to solve the problems that they cannot fully see. And we're all talking about innovation, right? But those innovations, they stagnate because people stop sharing their breakthrough ideas. And I'm gonna keep it simple, boss. Right? Does this pattern feel familiar in your leadership context? I mean, if you're recognizing that your own team dynamics align with what I'm describing, go ahead, just drop a little comment below here. Um, Again, I said it's kind of normal, it's kind of average, it's kind of where we all happen to be. If this is hitting close to home, and you want to explore what just the real intelligence could look like in your institution, I do offer complimentary strategy conversations, and be happy, really happy to just share a little virtual coffee with you. There will be a link. There's a link out there someplace. I don't always know where my admin hides the link. Shout out to you, Uni. Uh, but there's a link in the description to grab some time. Find that link, click on it if you just want a short little jam session. They're actually the best parts of my everyday. But let's talk about transformation. I really just discovered a simple approach that completely revolutionized how leaders access the truth that they need. And the results will transform how you think. It's a renewing of your mind. I talked about that yesterday. Yeah, about how you think about leading people and leading systems. So, Dr. Rodriguez, 6 months into her new role as provost in a regional university that had access to great credentials, just a real kind human being, clear academic vision, knew exactly what needed to happen, strong presidential support, and made a great team. But she kept having this nagging feeling that something was just off with her general education rollout. This was 24-25 academic year. And meanwhile, across town, uh, Superintendent Wilson was experiencing something eerily similar. Isn't it funny that across education, it doesn't matter whether we're in higher ed or K 12? Again, this was a literacy initiative, a different scale, just different context. Same leadership challenge, though. That's what I'm trying, the point that I'm trying to get across. Instead of making more assumptions, they both tried something that they felt terrifying for new leaders, just radical transparency about what they did not know. They had to just take the Kevlar off and go, I'm going to be capital V vulnerable. Dr. Rodriguez, she sent an email to her 23 department chairs. She said, I am discovering what I assumed about our Gen Ed implementation, or something like that. It might not match necessarily or align to your daily experience. Hey, would you help me by completing this sentence? I wish my provost knew, ... Down the road, Superintendent Wilson sent a nearly identical message to he had 25, 26 principals about this literacy rollout. The responses from both contexts were remarkable. They were just like eye popping. It changed a lot. It really did. Department chairs, I wish my provost knew that our general education requirements are creating scheduling nightmares that we're solving. We're staying on top of it, but it's kind of band-aid fixes and solutions that we're going to have again next semester and probably next year. I wish my provost knew that faculty were excited about the academic vision, but kind of confused about the assessment part of the expectations. Yeah, I wish my provost knew that 3 of our best professors are considering other positions because they feel like their concerns are not being heard. Down the road, Superintendent Wilson, I wish my superintendent knew that our literacy scores look good on paper, but we're seeing some concerning patterns in student engagement that aren't showing up in the data, and it's concerning for what might show up next year, right? I wish my superintendent knew that teachers love the new approach, but need more time to implement it properly with the F word, fidelity. Yeah. When something just wasn't working right, having a chance to rumble that out together in grade level teams or department teams. And just a simple, honest Revolutionary? Yes, because it's not happening enough in education. I think what research tells us, that kind of structured inquiry literally rewires how teams think together. And your teams are the ones that are going to fix this broken system, boss. It's not your next level hire. It really isn't. When leaders model curiosity about others' experiences and expectations, it creates what psychologists call relational energy. And you just know when you're in that wake, that fuel for sustained higher performance in all the complex stuff that you're looking at today. And it's not going to go away unless we're that intentional. I love many of her books back there, Dr. Brene Brown. You put that, it's like, okay, every time you type Brene, it's like, okay, what do you do with that E to make that little wink mark up on the top there? But I love the research that shows that educational teams practicing structured vulnerability, they are going to perform nearly 2.5 times better on innovative metrics. Not the traditional stuff. I mean, they're still going to do well there, but if you want to get into some creative thinking, yeah, yeah, vulnerability. You got to strip it away. Just the mechanism is pretty simple. When leaders replace assumptions with inquiry, staying curious, truth telling becomes that pathway to breakthrough. So here's the reality intelligence protocol that transformed those two scenarios that I just shared with you earlier. The week one, and consider this, if this is your first day back, consider framing the question and then send the question. Here's the question. Hey, I'm trying a new approach to understand how I can better support our shared mission, right? Would you complete this sentence? I wish my, whoever you are, whatever your title is, president, provost, vice president, dean, superintendent, assistant superintendent, principal, I wish they, right? Blank, 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 knew, blank, blank, blank. You can sign it. You can keep it anonymous if you want to, play that way. It's your choice. So week one, just send the question out. Week two, have a way to collect those, right? You probably have your admin pull it together where it just summarizes it. Use technology. There's a lot of tools that'll do this for you. Just week two, read it without reacting. Put your own Kevlar on, right? That's the hard part. This is where you become, asking the question isn't being vulnerable. I think reading it without reacting, because we're looking for a response. Two different things. So that's the challenge. That's the struggle. But read every response and look for patterns. Right? Resist that urge to just defend or explain, or that's got to be from that person that's an idiot, or whatever goes through your brain. Yeah, whether you're reading the feedback about tenure policies or test scores, just listen. Just listen to whatever it is. And then week three, follow up. If you do this activity without, you trigger the alarm when you send the question out. But then if you never follow up, guess what? You might be the worst boss that your people have ever worked for. Okay. So follow up, please. And start with, hey, thanks for trusting me with this, because this is kind of a trust fall, right? Help me understand more about this pattern that we're seeing. What would good going to great look like here? And then take it to a whole nother level in week four and just share it back. Bring the anonymous themes to your entire team. Here's what I learned about how we can better support each other and our students here in this district, on this campus, across the university, in the institution, whatever it happens to be. When leaders implement this protocol, the results are consistent across educational contexts. You're going to build more trust. You're going to see innovation increase. You're going to just see people taking more risks for the very mission of your campus, right? You might see less game playing. where I'm fighting for my preferences that don't line up with your principles as an organization that runs so rampant. You're going to see retention improve. Best students are going to stay. I think your best talent is going to stay. And decision-making accuracy is certainly going to improve because you're going to have all the data. You can't make great decisions without squeaky clean data, right? So Dr. Rodriguez and Superintendent Wilson that I talked about, they both implemented these monthly reality checks. They just made it part of their water system, right? Where their direct reports completed, I wish our leadership team knew blank, 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 and then collected those responses. And after a while, it just becomes metronomic. People expect it. And within 6 months, satisfaction scores just went out the roof. Faculty retention of the best talent, they're sticking around. There was an accreditation visit that they were a little bit worried about. They blew it out of the park, upper deck home runs in all categories. Principals retention increased. You saw student achievement gains. The board confidence in both of those perspectives, they just tightened. The stability came, and not that it's happily ever after. There's still lots of interference and lots of challenges, but the most powerful part, I think, is when leaders model that curiosity and that vulnerability. It really cascades throughout the entire organization. It becomes part of your culture. People like us, we do things like this. Faculty begin sharing real challenges, and students see adults working together kind of like grown-ups, right? Authentically. The entire culture shifts from performance to truth, right? To better performance. So you got to choose your future. If you don't intentionally create these truth-telling environments, inevitably, your worst day last year might be your everyday this year. Your best people will continue suffering in silence until they find leaders who actually want to know what they're experiencing. Your highest capacity players might be sneaking out the back door because they want to work across the institution where they can win and win again. Yeah, not because you're a bad leader, but because you're leading based upon incomplete information. So take it to the next level. That personal cost, bulk of your budget, right? It could be devastating. You'll keep making decisions in isolation that affect thousands of your students. Enough about that soundtrack. Here's what really matters. When leaders operate on assumptions instead of truth, students pay the ultimate price. You know that. Every day you lead based upon incomplete information is another day that real problems are just going to go unsolved. And the brand of education today is, with current current administration, there's this rebranding that one of the most inefficient institutions on the planet. Well, let's not prove them right. When we have unsolved problems that impact classrooms and lecture halls, I think our most important response is to begin solving those problems, right? With the brilliance of the teams that you have on campus, because your potential is beyond the ceiling that you're looking at. It really is. When you think about your influence, if you're a campus president, you influence how many department chairs? Not sure. How many faculty? How many students? If you're a school superintendent, you influence how many principals? How many teachers? How many students? When you was in position of leadership, right? When you sit in these information vacuums, the ripple effects touch entire communities and maybe even for generations. And I don't want to overemphasize this, but I don't want to underemphasize it. When you don't create truth-telling environments, they become force multipliers for every person in your entire system. So, Just consider your budget meetings where you hear the truth about what's working and what isn't, whether it's about research funding or textbook purchases. The ground truth is important. Imagine crisis responses, whether your team's honest input creates solutions you never could have seen alone. Picture retention conversations where people feel heard and valued instead of just isolated and misunderstood. So the question really isn't how do I get my team to perform better? The question is how do I create an environment where my team feels that safe sharing is acceptable? And how do I get them to succeed in that arena? Yeah, you don't owe your leadership style and explanation. You just owe your future impact, the kind of truth telling culture that makes breakthrough results possible. So if this idea of inquiry if it's starting to resonate with your leadership situation, what you're glaring at today, if you can see how this might transform your relationship with your team, with your communication, with your alignment, whether you're leading a department or an entire district or entire campus, go ahead and share your thoughts in the comments. That we're creating a bit of a community here. And if you're ready to move beyond just the assumptions to authentic connection, I'd love to explore that with you personally. You can grab a complimentary virtual coffee. We do these things every single day. I'd love to hear some of the leadership challenges that you're wrestling with and perhaps give you a better perspective. So let's bring this thing into a landing. So before the stream ends, I want you to do something that will maybe change your leadership perspective immediately. Take your phone out and draft a message to one person on your team, whether it's a department chair, principal, dean, doesn't matter, somebody that is within your stream of influence. Hey, I'm working to become a better leader. Write that down. I'm working to become a better leader. Write that down. And would value your honest input. Would you please complete this sentence? I wish you knew ... about anything related to our work together. Yeah, if you're not doing it via your phone, just scratching that down, maybe you're at the drive-through grabbing lunch today, but please write that down. I'm working on becoming a better leader. That's a vulnerable statement. Your team is going to know that you are a very accomplished leader who also is hungry to get to the next level. That's admirable. And I'd value your honest input. Would you please complete this sentence? I wish you knew blank, 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 right? About anything related to our work together. And then send it before you second guess yourself, because you're going to, that 3.5 pounds of mass between your ears might fight you for that little piece of paper or that thing on your phone right now. Just one person, one question. And let's just see what happens. Okay. So you have the right to choose now. You can continue leading based on assumptions about what your people just need to experience, or you can build the truth-telling intelligence that transforms good leaders into amazing ones. Most systems, again, back to average, from community college presidents to elementary principals, they operate with just this 40% discretionary effort. It's incomplete about what the real challenges are. This means you're making critical decisions affecting thousands of students without understanding the full picture. So in education, while every choice impacts learners' future, that's not just efficient. I think it's unconscionable. Yeah. Because it's part of your calling, part of your mission. So here are 3 signals that urgently, if you are just like reading the leaves right now, that should get your attention. If your team seems just disengaged during meetings, despite having all the best talent that you could hire, if there's just this level of disengagement during team meetings, Yeah, the alarm should be going off. If you keep solving the same problems repeatedly without any lasting change, I hope it's getting your attention. If you suspect that there's challenges that your people aren't sharing with you, you're wow. If any of these resonate, you're not alone. You're part of a huge group of people out there, and you're definitely not stuck. Let me just tell you, that's where I'm just so hopeful. The teams that I work with mastered these structured inquiry protocols. They consistently achieve better retention, better engagement during meetings, um, faster problem solving, just higher innovation, and dramatically decreased drama and gossip, just the garbage that gets in the way and interferes with you doing your work. But more than stats, they transform. They transform just the whole work experience. They transform the dinner time conversations that are happening at night between your people and you, perhaps. So here's another thing you could do right now. You could take a 5-minute reality assessment. We do a TQ assessment. You can find it on our webpage, higherperformance.com. And if you click that button, Get Started, higherperformancegroup.com, you can write that down, click Get Started. And it's just a real quick diagnosis. It'll only take you 5 minutes, preferably intended to be taken by teams of people. Got to have 10 in the end is what I say, 10 in the end. Oh my goodness, I kind of feel like I'm starting to sound like a Saturday Night Live portrayal of a federal leader. Yeah. Got to have 10 in the end, 10 in the end. Oh, Joe, might be nap time for Joe. That the diagnostic tool, it just reveals exactly where your team excels at sharing truth and where those dangerous little pitfalls might be for you. So you'll discover your team's current truth telling patterns, your biggest blind spots, your specific pathways for success, and a number of other things. Again, just a 5-minute assessment. You can find that at higherperformancegroup.com. Click the Get Started. You'll see the research behind it, and just a real quick setup menu for getting your team set up to take that assessment. Or you can take part in the keynote that gives a ton of inspiration, a lot of challenge, and equips you to do much of this work on your own. So, the students in your classroom, lecture halls, they deserve to have leaders that understand that full truth about what's really happening in your system. So take the assessment, build that relational intelligence, keep your best people. The choice is really yours. So before we go, I always say this at the end of the stream. If it opened your eyes to the power of asking better questions, just hit that like button. You can subscribe to this channel for more real talk leadership content. Actually, your engagement, it really helps me reach more leaders who are making decisions in these vacuums, because it does get to be kind of lonely out there. And here's the other thing. If this really hit home and you want to just find a truth-telling opportunity to talk about what's really playing out within your leadership team context, let's grab a virtual coffee. The link is somewhere up here, over there, down there. Take a peek. It's in the description someplace, and it's completely on me. It's free. I'd love to meet you and talk a bit about some of the stuff getting in the way of your success. So I hope you're starting to see how one simple question could transform your leadership effectiveness. And if you're realizing that these assumptions might be costing you more than you thought, just drop a comment, click the link. Let's have a conversation. The coffee's always warm here. Sometimes the most powerful leadership breakthrough, it does come from the simplest questions asked with genuine curiosity. So those questions are waiting. It's really your choice. And thanks for joining today. Remember, great leaders don't have all the answers. I don't. You don't. But collectively, perhaps there's a solution, because they ask better questions and they stop assuming. They start asking. So your people are wanting to tell you exactly what you need to know to help them, to help you all succeed. Your students are counting on it. Your team is ready for it. Your legacy depends on it. So stop leading in the dark, boss, and start asking the questions that changes everything. I wish my boss knew blank, blank, blank. Yeah, those solutions, they're not in the next consultant's proposal. I think they're already in your building, boss. You just have to ask the right questions. Peace.